Hello, thanks for watching. This week we're doing Taylor Swift. I wanted to do someone a bit more, just move away from the male Hollywood actors, um, and look at someone a bit more present in a slightly different industry. So today we're doing Taylor Swift, and if you look at her palm, she's a long palm and long fingers, and it's a bit confusing because in some of the images I found online, her hands appear squarish and her fingers not quite so long. So it's really difficult with these celebrity readings where I'm just taking blurry images offline and cross-referencing each of the images. It's not the best way to do palm readings, and I'm never going to find out. I'm never going to be able to do an incredibly accurate reading this way. But it is a good idea. It's a good way to find out certain things about character and health, and it's interesting, and it also relates to the differences between people who aren't quite as successful. And success is seen in the palm in several ways. One of those ways is the obvious success line, which you can see here, curves down into the lunar mount. You can just about make it out. It certainly it appears stronger above the heart line, and it reaches towards Apollo, the place of creativity. And all of Taylor's fingers are leaning towards. I mean, Jupiter's leaning in there, obviously. Saturn leans in slightly towards the straightest finger, which is Apollo. And Apollo, the Apollo mount itself, is quite, it's higher up on the palm than the rest of the mounts. Saturn and Apollo are this place of hard work and creativity. So all her tributes rely and depend on the main attributing sort of factor to her personality and her. She knows within herself, unconsciously, that she knows her strengths and she's playing to those strengths. Her ability to express and communicate, her hard work, and practical, sensibility, her decision making, and her ambition. All of these things rely on her ability to create. Also, the Apollo finger itself is a bit more well produced than the other fingers. So a water hand is typically someone who is a creative and artistic, someone who's more in touch with their dreams, their unconscious thoughts, someone who is more in touch with their feelings and other people's feelings as well. Inherently, I suppose water hands are more sensitive than the other types, and sensitivity is a mixed blessing. It's a double-edged sword because whilst we have an ability to create and inspire through this sort of extra sensitivity, we also feel what others are feeling as well, and so the world can become quite a depressing and dark place to live in when you're a water hand, particularly if you're a water hand with a long Saturn finger. But there are certain signs in Taylor's palm that create balance in this area. And one of those signs you can see on the left hand here, and that is the squarish element to the tips of her fingers here, particularly with Mercury, Apollo, and Saturn. There is a squarish element as well to a very sort of spatulate, squarish kind of element to Apollo as well, but particularly with the other three. And someone with square fingertips is someone who's logical, they're practical, they're very down to earth, they've got a good sense of work ethic, they're rational people. They are realistic and punctual, and I suppose realistic is the main takeaway here. And so with water hands, particularly the downfall of being a water hand is being um, over imaginative um, and not grounded enough. And that's because water is this place of, in the palm especially, lunar, is this place of imagination. And too much imagination can lead to this unrealistic expectations, to even depravity or um, fantasism, or even suicidal sort of tendencies. These dark um, sort of thoughts and feelings can overtake the water hand. So to have this sort of grounding nature, which is represented by the fingertips there, is a way to it shows that this person is counteracted. There's there's um, there's balance there. That's what this shows. And also with Mercury, Mercury is quite sort of low set in the palm here. It's pretty low set in the palm, which might show there were some difficulties with early bonding experiences in latency. But despite the low set Mercury, Mercury still reaches above the first phalanx of Apollo there. And that's a strong sign. And singers have this, generally speaking. And although you can't see it very clearly in this image as well, Jupiter does reach halfway above the halfway phalanx of Saturn as well. And again, that's a typical singer trait. So her ability to express herself, her voice, quite literally, is being heard. Her message is being heard way above and beyond those of her sort of immediate social network. The thumbs are curious because they show this adaptability, this flexible thumb here. And also the thumb is very low set as well. This shows intelligence, the ability to absorb information in a very sort of leveled and realistic way. A low set thumb shows a humanitarian or an animal lover, but it also shows also people with low set thumbs are generally book lovers as well, and that coincides with this, absorbing, wanting to absorb knowledge. The third phalange of Mercury is not short, so this shows someone who is, I'm not, why am I pointing that out? There's nothing particularly out of the ordinary about this phalange, but water hands tend to be more on the naive side, and that's because of this imaginative, rich, imaginative qualities. The palm itself is longer, so lunar is longer. The expanse of imagination is far-reaching, and so they tend to be more on the open-minded side, and sometimes that can even further be pulled into this side of naivety, almost a bit green. But the third phalange of Mercury is a good length, and so that shows that this person is not too open-minded to the point of naivety. However, her heart line and her headline are a good space apart, and so she is open-minded, and so that's why I kind of came to this. I looked at this third phalange of Mercury to see if it was short, and if it was, then I would think, okay, well, there is perhaps she's a naive, but she's not, obviously. And I don't think you get to a place of the sort of height of success being naive. So it was never an assumption, but it was just, you can never diagnose or come to a conclusion by one sign or symptom alone, or at least you shouldn't. I mean, there are certain exceptions until proven otherwise. Also, the headline does reach quite low down into Luna, and that would be a worry if the fingers weren't so well aligned. And in this image, you can see more clearly the gentle leanings of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury towards the most aligned and strongest aspect of Taylor's personality, and that is Apollo. And this alignment, which keeps her her skills and her attributes and her personality, her psychological kind of bedrock, everything about her keeps all of this in check and stable and able to manage. Is you can see she's she'd been brought up well, and she's also managed to bring herself up well. There does seem to be a bit of a gap here between Jupiter and Saturn, and that might indicate she's not got as strong a relationship with her father as she does her mother. Again, you can see this very flexible willpower of the thumb here, and that shows a few things. Firstly, flexible thumbs are certainly associated, the flexible kind of bent tip of the thumb is associated with a predisposition to joints, joint pains, and that's very typical of water hands. Water hands have a susceptibility to back injuries and back pain, and you can look for that in the career line quite often. You can't really see it here. I don't think you can anyway. It's just a very blurry image. But we're going off on a sidetrack here a little bit. When you see a career line that comes up and changes direction, or if it's sort of bending, waving, or if there's a bit of a zigzag going on, you can definitely draw from that the possibility that this person has back pain or will suffer with some sort of back injury at some point. But the as I say, the flexible tip of the thumb, the willpower there, is associated with that. And there's a stronger case for that in water palms, but also it's quite sort of thin, the tip of the thumb there, and that shows someone with a refined taste. It also shows someone that, and this is true of flexible thumbs as well, this coincides with this sort of thin tip of the thumb, that they often sleep more than others. They need a good 9 hours of sleep at night plus, and they can become tired quite quickly, and that's because they are brilliant in short sprints. I mean, literally, they're very brilliant at working very hard and very well for a short amount of time, and then after that, they need to rest, and a bit more susceptible to illness as well. They can become run down quite quickly, quite easily. Their immune systems aren't quite as strong. But that's just, as I say, this is just one sign. If the lifeline shows otherwise and the health line shows otherwise, well, then these things can kind of counterbalance. And there's a lot of balance in this hand. As I say, the lengths of the fingers are excellent. You've got Apollo and Jupiter. Apollo is just ever so slightly higher than Jupiter, but it's not too high, and neither is Jupiter. Too high would be, Apollo is slightly on the high side, but it's not too high to the point where this person is seeking glory and reputation to spite her peers and even to her own detriment. She's not, a person with an immensely high Apollo is a gambler quite typically, because they're looking for that next hit, um, despite the consequences. And the balance of Jupiter and Apollo, the reason why it's just one of the signs of fame, and why it's a sign of fame is because it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be famous if you have this. I looked at a lady's palm last week and she has this, and she's not going to be famous necessarily, but she could handle fame if she were to be famous. And this is because Jupiter is ambition and ego, it's ideas, it's authority, diplomacy, judgment. And so when a person's ability to create is level with their ability to with their ambition and their ideas, these things keep each other in check, keep each other in line with each other. And so when your ego and your vanity are at the same level, the expectations are the same. And so you can handle this way of life, the what people are saying about you, what they're thinking about you, and the constant attention. It's more easily handled if you're a person with this sort of level-headed attitude between ideas and ability to create. So it's interesting because Jupiter, this decision making, and Apollo, this creativity, they are in the center of them is this hard work, and this is at a good length as well. So everything is aligned here. Everything is aligned. This is typically the person of a successful person. So the signs of success in a person's palm are varied, and I'll do a video on that at some point, but Taylor is probably a pretty good example of this. Also, and I suppose there's probably another sign of success actually, the length of willpower and logic being equal. Ideally, you want these two to be equal, because it means that your ability to carry out your ideas is the same as, well, your willpower is the same as your logic. Your motivation is the same as your ideas. This ability, the reserve. You're not going to, when a person's willpower is overpowering their logic, when a person's willpower is longer than their logic, they're better with their head than their hands. They can be manipulative, bullyish even. They push others around to get their own way. They're forceful, but their logic, their ideas aren't quite as strong, and they utilize other people's ideas rather than create their own. And alternatively, when someone's logic is stronger than the willpower, when it's longer, they have an abundance of ideas but lack the willpower to implement them, and quite often have too many ideas and jump from one to the other without being able to commit or stick to any one plan, and may well get pushed around by others, by the former example that I've just provided. So to have an equal length of both means that you have the ability to stick up for your ideas. You have this sort of tenacity and well, the willpower, the force to back the ideas and thoughts behind you in an equal measure, so that you'll take on board what other people say in a measured way. You'll listen, but at the same time, you're not going to back down too easily. So again, this is balance. And so when looking for the signs of fame in a person's in your own palm, I suppose it's about balance. If there's something out of balance, then there's compensation for that in some way, and often that compensation is not healthy. But that's because we don't recognize the imbalance in ourselves. And the only real imbalance I can see in this person's palm is this low set Mercury. And as I say, that stems from childhood. It's the early bonding period. And it's not as if this person has their ability to express and communicate has been crippled in any way, because Mercury is long enough. It doesn't show it here, but it does in fact reach further than the first phalanx of Apollo, as I've shown earlier. So despite whatever occurred early on in her life, she still managed to improve on her ability to express herself and communicate. Her ability to develop, that's the word I'm looking for, to develop these expressive skills of language and communication and learning. They've all developed despite these early problems, and that's due to Apollo being so high set, and also I think with support from strong female role models early on in life as well. And again, you can see, I mean, this is not the best image at all, but just from a chirognomy perspective, you can see that this is clearly a long palm, long fingers. You can see the balance in the thumb there between logic and willpower. You can also see that the heart line creeps in from the side of the palm. It's quite low down on the palm. And as far as I can tell, and I've not read this in any book or anything, but I believe that this is, it shows someone who has a lot to give, a very giving person. And this is evident in, as I say, the low set thumb, the distance between the heart and the headline as well. A very generous person, very open and giving person who cares about others. And this one was a confusing image for me because you can see that the palm looks very sort of squarish here with long fingers. So I thought, well, maybe this is an air hand I'm looking at, but no. It's just sometimes some of these images I think are quite sort of distorted. And you can get a good idea as to just how long the thumb is as well from a lot of these images. And a long thumb represents, again, intelligence, but also the ability to inspire, to carry out ideas in a way that's far-reaching, and to influence others as well. And in this image, you can clearly see the leanings here, and it almost looks as though Apollo is conflicted as to which way to lean, because it kind of tries to lean towards Mercury and then straightens out. That's not a good example. But Mercury also leans in as well, sort of gently at the tip there, and that shows tact and diplomacy. Jupiter leans in. Her decision making and her ego shelters beneath her conscience. So again, this is another sign that this person is very right and wrong orientated, this conscience driven person. That's what this shows. And in this image here, you can clearly see the thumb, the length of the thumb in contrast with Jupiter. I mean, it's not extremely accurate representation, but you get a good idea. So a long thumb is a thumb that reaches halfway above the first phalanx of the third phalanx of Jupiter or more, and this one, obviously does that. And as I say, a long thumb is a sign of intelligence and ability to influence, but it's also a deep thinker, someone who thinks very deeply about things, and that coincides with this person's headline as it drops right down into lunar. But it's a different type of deep thinking. It's not necessarily all about their thinking about, I suppose it enhances how the headline thinks. And the long fingers in palmistry is a person processing things slowly. She's thinking about things slowly. I doubt this person comes up with their ideas without thinking through them, thinking them through. This is someone who doesn't do things spontaneously and processes things, breaks them down. I would think that this person remembers her dreams and probably writes them down. And this is a pretty awful image, but you can clearly see from it several things. The length of the thumb, just how well formed the fingers are. In particular here, the sun line. The sun line is the success line. Sometimes I think it's referred to as the money line, although it really does depend on the person and what's important to them. Money certainly is important to this person, not as important to some others, but this success line is leaning more on the Mercury side of things, and this is the Apollo Mercury section of the palm. The quadrant, if you like, is the first quadrant, and it's all about how we show and reveal ourselves, how we express ourselves and show ourselves off to the outside world. And so when the sun line is, I mean, it's still on Apollo, otherwise it wouldn't be a sun line, but it's leaning more towards Mercury. So success is certainly, it relates to and relies on this ability to communicate a message. And this might be the best image I have of this person's palm. And you can see here, this is obviously left hand, so this is the person's thoughts and desires and what they had hoped and what they still hope for. You can see clearly here the career line reaching from low down on lunar, which shows the desire for an audience in a career. Mercury, it's there, the Mercury line, or intuition line as it's sometimes called. It's not clearly defined. That's just likely the image itself, but it's there, it's strong, and it's sometimes referred to as the health line. And I was confused up until fairly recently as to how a health line and an intuition line, can be the same thing. But then I, after doing some reading, realized that it's because it's tied in with the nervous system and the nervous system senses. So quite literally, our ability to sense goes beyond the nervous system. And so it relates to the two things. And often a person in business, successful person in business, has a very strong Mercury intuition or health line, whatever you want to call it. And that's because the instincts are there in business, that kind of need to pick up on opportunities and the ability to read the room in meetings. And with successful people as well, I think a strong Mercury line you're always going to see it. I can't, this image isn't very helpful here, but it is certainly there. It's strong and it does reach up onto the Mercury mount. And you can see that the headline reaches into Luna as well, this elongated place of imagination, creativity. And as I say, I think this person remembers her dreams and probably writes them down and utilizes this unconscious, expansive imagination in her work. So a person with a headline that reaches quite low down into Luna does have depressive, kind of despondent persona, unless there's other things in the palm that can kind of counterbalance this, counteract it. And as I say, this large gap between the head and the health line certainly have that. Also notice a strong girdle of Venus coming through here. It's not complete, it's not completely connected from the other side there. A girdle of Venus certainly shows someone's sensitivity of an awareness of their emotions, and I think it also helps with understanding their own emotions and other people's emotions, and this helps with writing the kinds of songs, I suppose, that she writes. There's lots of things are said and written about the girdle of Venus. It's generally speaking, they used to say in medieval palmistry that it was the sign of deviants and prostitutes and drug dealers and pimps. The kind of people that have this are living on the sort of seedy side of life, but it's just not true. It's an emotional enhancer. It's a sort of barometer to gauge how a person reacts in certain psychological and physiological emotional environments. And although it's not completely formed, the formation that is there is very strong. It's very deep. She's very in touch with her emotions. She's able to respond in a way that's reasonable in emotional situations. This is a person who's certainly able to draw from and articulate her emotions well, and that's in line with I wouldn't say that if she had a very sort of stunted or crippled expressive Mercury finger. In other words, this person has a very healthy way of reacting to members of the opposite sex in all environments. And on that note, the heart line, it's a straight heart line. A straight heart line shows someone who is not attracted in the sort of masculine sense, not aroused by physicality. This is a person who requires a more sort of psychological, a deep mental sort of bond in their relationships. And again, this headline is very straight until it starts to lean into Luna, which shows this person is very level-headed, very practical, but then knows how to utilize this sort of dreamy, imaginative, creative quality to herself. She's more than one person, it seems, and that's also evident in the double lifeline. Often people with double lifelines literally live a double life. More than that, they are just incredibly hardworking, never stop working. Their life is so busy that a second lifeline has developed almost. And the second lifeline that's developed here is almost, it's very easily confused with a Mars line. It's this second lifeline has no time for relationships because they're just so busy. This one on the inside, it stems from a place of motivation and drive, and this is her work life. And I say it has no time for any sort of relationships, and that's because it kind of cuts the Venus mount short. A Venus mount, uh, the original kind of lifeline here, well, that's just too wide. It cuts off the Venus mount in a way that's sort of healthier because Venus is this place of love and stability and family and friendship. And so when a lifeline comes around too short, it's almost as though the person's life isn't allowing them for that. And so there's two different sides to her. On the outside, she's this person who has time and will make time when she can for friends and loved ones. But the reality is, at the moment, work is just too much, and that doesn't carry on forever. Around 40s, mid 40s, it seems to sort of stop. At least this is the left hand. This is what she has planned for, perhaps unconsciously herself. Pluto is very strong here as well. That's a great sign. It's this, again, it ties in with Luna. It's this, not much is known about it, but it's an extra kind of expansive imagination and creativity to draw on. And it's particularly useful for water hands, for creatives. And it's a place of, it's even deeper imagination. It's almost ancestral memories. And I suspect that this person draws on that because the fate line certainly comes from that direction, and the headline is leaning towards that area as well. And a person's fate line that comes from this low down on Luna, almost Neptune, is certainly someone who's said to have come back from a past life with unfinished business. So there's a great rhythm here, and also order, routine as well, with this sort of kink in the thumb there, which isn't very evident in this picture alone, but it's a given really. And that also ties in with this person, being very practical and routine. I expect every area, aspect of their day and week is mapped out. Get up, eat this, work out, go to the studio. Everything is figured out and mapped out on display. But that's everything I think I can say about this person. This is probably the best image I have of this person's palm, and it's still not incredible. But I think I've found a few things out here and relayed where the signifiers of fame are in this person's palm as well, which is also quite cool. So yeah, thanks for watching, and please subscribe and like and all of that jazz. See you next time.